Welcome to Work from the Inside Out, a podcast that highlights real-life stories, practical strategies, and best practices for transitioning your career from unhappiness and dissatisfaction to fulfillment, meaning, and joy. Now here is your host, career and executive coach, Tammy Guler-Loeb.
Hey everyone, I am truly delighted to introduce my guest today, Mary O'Donoghue. Mary is a media coach for women nonfiction authors, a best-selling parenting author, and a former post-producer for the Oprah Winfrey Show. She has worked in high-profile television for decades, including years on the Today Show, NBC Nightly News, and Meet the Press. At Mary's company, Authors in Media, her mission is to elevate the wisdom of women nonfiction authors by teaching them how to get national publicity and do media interviews that sell books, grow their impact, and change the world. As a nonfiction author whose book catapulted to #1 in parenting and broke into Amazon's top 100 after a media interview, Mary knows what makes a media interview strategic and profitable. Her unique coaching framework, the Media Impact Method, which is IMPACT, which we will talk about, is a proven path to publicity with purpose and has consistently led to author success in national media, with her clients reaching audiences of more than 1 billion so far. So please join me in welcoming Mary O'Donoghue. Welcome, Mary.
Thank you so much, Tammy.
I am so delighted to have you here today. And as you know, on Work from the Inside Out, we love beginning with the beginning, the formative years. So take us back to those early years and how they may or may not have informed where you are today.
You know, I think they did really. And I kind of go back in my head to age 11, because that was a very pivotal year for me. I'm first generation American. I'm a child of immigrants, of Irish immigrants. And my grandmother passed away in Ireland. Oh. And we were very close. And she was my only grandparent. And then, so it was very hard for my mom. She lost her mom. And then 10 weeks later, my dad died.
Oh my goodness.
So in a 10-week period, you know, we had this huge upheaval.
Yeah.
Mom became a widow. She was still grieving her mother. And she was just about to start teaching in Catholic school. And so she kind of, receded
yeah,
in many ways. And as an 11-year-old, the second oldest, I had a 12-year-old brother, 9-year-old brother, and a 7-year-old sister. And so I kind of took on the parenting reins because my mother emotionally was struggling for a while.
Yeah.
Understandable. And so I became very, very responsible. And I look back on that time, and that was when I, was no longer a child. There was no going back at that point.
Mm-hmm.
11 was the end of my childhood.
Yeah.
And so I took over everything. I cooked, and I'm not a good cook, but I cooked for my mother when she came home from school. She would take a nap. Then I would make bad dinners for people. If the dog threw up, my siblings would just wait for me to come home from school so I could clean up. I just stepped into that role. And I think I did it in part because I needed to know that the person in charge was going to come through for everybody.
Yeah.
And I guess I only trusted myself enough for, it was like my grandmother, my dad, and my mother, sort of my holy trinity as a Catholic schoolgirl. And 2 of them were gone in a, blink of an eye. And so I was a very anxious child, but I kept everything together. I kept my emotions in check. I didn't cry in front of other people. I didn't cry in front of my mother. I cried on my own.
Wow.
So I was grieving at that time, but I always remembered as this time I took charge, and I was like, when did I do my grieving? And I just kind of did that on my own. But
Wow.
my father was an alcoholic. And so on some level, I didn't have to deal with his issues of being
Yeah.
an alcoholic and being somebody who was like emotionally and physically abusive person.
Wow.
He was, he would hit us and all kinds of stuff. So, there was a part of me that was like, okay, good. I don't have to deal with that.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think
Um,
that's really a very honest
Yeah.
feeling,
Yeah.
to almost be you don't wish harm on anyone, and yet there
Right.
might be that sense of relief that I
Yeah.
don't have to go through that now.
Yeah. I loved him, but he was a complicated person.
Yeah.
And he also relied on me and told me that he was dying and didn't tell anyone else. And so I had to be prepared. And, that was not a smart thing for him to do, that, to put that on an 11-year-old. But so I became responsible at a very early age.
Yeah.
And then people started just assuming I would handle things. And so I can remember, Tammy, like when we would get Social Security.
Yeah.
And then the checks would stop coming. And my mom was just a teacher at a Catholic school. She didn't make a lot of money. And she made less than the men. And when she asked why, she was told, well, men have families to support. And she was like, what do you think I'm doing?
Yeah, really?
Nonetheless, she was paid less. But I kind of would take over. And I remember several times, probably several times, being on the phone with the Social Security Administration and saying, where are our checks? Oh, well, such and such happened. Okay, well, can you send them again? Yes, we'll send them again. Okay. And also the back checks. You missed 3 checks. We need those.
Whoa.
And I was 11 years old. And I can remember the phone with the cord.
Yeah, sure.
And I would be like, oh, no, you're sending those too. And I would say, do I need to speak to your supervisor?
You did this at 11.
We needed the money. And so I became a fighter very early. And I learned to be independent, and I learned to stand up for myself, and I learned to fight for what I believed was right. And so
where do you think that came from, though, Mary? Like, I'm thinking, like, I mean, I've heard stories from other people who had to step up at an early age and kind of almost become like, like what they call like the parentified child kind of role. And yet then there are some people who grew up under similar circumstances who couldn't find their way through things. And so somehow, like you're saying, well, I had to be, but there was still something within you that knew to do those things.
Well, it's funny because my relatives would say, oh, you're so strong. You're so strong for your mother. And that's so good. It wasn't strength. It was terror. I was afraid that the whole family would just fall apart. I wasn't like, I got this, everybody, I'll be strong. I was terrified. And somebody had to hold it together, and nobody else seemed to be stepping up for that role. And so if I didn't do that, I figured we would fall apart. Something would happen to my mother, and then we'd all end up in different places.
Yeah. Now, at the moment, were you thinking, why isn't anyone else stepping up to help?
I think there was comfort in the sense of control that I thought I was exerting over the situation.
Yep.
That if I made sure, that, my brother didn't forget his lunch, or, that this note was signed or something, like if I was like, put it in front of my mom at the end of the night and said, you need to sign this for, my sister or whatever, so she can go to this field trip. Okay. Because my mother was just struggling,
Wow.
And so it gave me a sense of normalcy. And I brought that control freaky into my adult life in a big way.
Yeah.
And, getting married, many years ago and having 2 now young adult children, I had to learn to let go of a lot of that sense of control.
Sure.
There's no real control.
Yeah.
The illusion of control is something that I've had to give up over the years. But it was all really about making myself feel safe.
it's impressive at 11 that you even knew to pick up the phone and call Social Security or make sure permission slips got signed and things. I mean, there's just some of those are things that a lot of kids at that age wouldn't have even known what to do. So
yeah, I don't know if I did know what to do. I just saw the balls dropping. And so I just tried to keep the balls in the air at all times.
You must have been paying attention somehow. So
anxiety will do that to you. So when you're an anxious person, you are paying attention to the balls that are dropping and you don't want them to hit the ground. And so you are the one who's running to grab them. And the illusion is that you're amazing. Look how strong you are. And but the truth is it's just a facade. And underneath it, you are really struggling, but you can't let anyone else know that because they all look at you and think, oh, thank goodness one of us is strong. And so
did it get any easier as your siblings got older and your mother got more distant from all her losses? I mean, how were you able to, clearly you came into your own and have had, a very successful career. Sort of in a way you were being a producer back then.
Yeah,
even.
It's true. Well, there was sort of a line of demarcation, which is that my mother had just started teaching. She was a full-time teacher. And so it became overwhelming for her. And because she and my dad were from Ireland, she wanted to go back and live in Ireland. And there was a way that she could collect, I don't know, like a widow's pension or something like that over there. And so we rented our house in Chicago and we moved to Ireland for a year when I was 14. I was a freshman in high school. Moving to another country is a really big deal. And it changes you.
I bet.
But it allowed my mother not to work for a year.
Oh,
and
wow.
So during that year, she could kind of shift and handle more things. And so I could kind of recede from that role. And then I didn't really have to kind of go back to that role. So then I could just be a high school student for a year. And then after a year, we bought a house over there. It was the nicest house like we ever lived in.
Wow.
And, but my brother was 15. He was like, well, I'm going back. I'm not staying here. And then my mother, I guess, figured that if we were going to fracture, then she might as well go back to Chicago.
Oh, wow.
I don't think that was her choice necessarily. But we didn't necessarily want to stay there as kids. There wasn't much to do, it was a small town. But, I had a good experience. I made friends and I was in a French choir. I was in a Gaelic choir.
Wow.
I didn't know what I was singing. I was just starting off. But it was a good experience to have that really mind-opening experience of being in another country and then sort of seeing the news that was happening in America at the time. And then you kind of see other people's point of view.
Yeah.
And so that was a real eye-opening experience and a very good experience. And then I came back and I was a sophomore in high school in a Catholic all-girls high school in Chicago. That was really where I fell into a television major in college. Yeah.
Oh, in college or high school?
Well, and I was in high school and I had this, teacher who I really loved. Her name is Sandra Ione. And I knew Miss Ione from working in the theater. So I volunteered in the theater to run Spotlight. I ran the Spotlight and Miss Ione was the person in charge of theater. And I just loved her. I just thought she was great. She was going to teach a broadcasting class. And I was like, oh, I'll take that class. I love Miss Ione.
Wow.
And signed up for her class. And then the first day I showed up and there's this man standing there's this man on the television and it says play and we play. And it's the guy who like did the tech maintenance stuff. It's like the maintenance guy. like for the theater, like the tech mate and stuff. We're like, wait, what now?
Yeah.
And he said, Miss Ione got a job in television. She left.
Oh my
And
goodness.
I'm going to be teaching this class. And so it's like a room full of, I think we were juniors and
A room full of teenagers.
yeah. And we're sort of like, oh, come on, well, his name was Rob Bernard, I remember, but he was a phenomenal teacher. And he really taught us to think critically about television. And I learned a ton. And prior to that, I'd been on this path where I thought I was going to become a psychologist, and I'd taken psychology classes in high school. And
Wow.
that was it. I was done. I loved television after that. And, years later, I did some work at WGN where Miss Ione had gotten hired, and I got to work with her.
Oh, cool.
And tell her, all the stories. So I'm like, if you didn't get this job, I would have been a psychologist. But so I fell into that. And then I majored in broadcasting and broadcast journalism in college.
Were you able to work in the industry while you were in college, or did you have to wait till you graduated? Or
yeah, I got internships. I got jobs. My first job in a television station, there was a sign posted in the broadcasting department, and it said that they were hiring at the station that was on campus happened to be the PBS station. So they were hiring at that station. And they needed production assistants, very entry level. And they said, we're going to have you, do some work, like hanging lights and things like that. So jeans, t-shirt, gym shoes type of,
right.
They specifically said that. So there were 3 women who showed up, 3 young girls, me and 2 other women, and then a bunch of guys. And the other women were both wearing heels and miniskirts. And I was like, wait, what now? And I'm in the jeans, a t-shirt, and tennis shoes, gym shoes. And I did all the things, and I got up on the ladder, which of course they couldn't do. And I hung the lights, and I'm small. And then a few days later, they posted who got the job. And a couple of guys got the job, and those 2 girls, and not me. So I marched. It's funny because I said I'm quiet, but I mean, I think I'm quiet. I was quiet kind of around my peers, but I was not intimidated by adults. And so
well, you've been an adult your whole life. So
exactly.
What's to be intimidated by, right?
I went and this man, Dave, who I remember too. So I went in, and this guy, Dave, was the guy who had made the decision. And I got directly in front of his face. And I said to him, how dare you? You post this thing that says we're supposed to show up in jeans and da-da-da-da-da, and we have to be qualified, and we have to be able to do this. And I got up on that ladder, and I hit that, and I'm 5'5" and 105 pounds, but I did that. And these 2 girls show up in miniskirts, and they get hired? Are you kidding me? And I'm in his face. And as I'm saying this, he's like, okay, you're hired. Okay. And I was like, well, all right then. When do I start? And I got hired, and both of them lasted less than a week. I did the job. And years later, I worked with Dave in Chicago too, because it's a small community.
Oh, wow.
And he remembered me. But and I did a great job for them. And so I worked there, and then I got an internship at a radio station in Peoria. And I was like an overnight DJ on Fridays and Saturdays, I think. And another friend of mine was an overnight DJ at another station. And so when we would, so you can imagine what like my social life was like. I had no social life because on Fridays and Saturday nights I worked all night.
Yeah.
And like midnight to 5 kind of thing. So I did that for a while, and I just kind of was like, I don't think I want to be in radio, but it was fun. Yeah. And then I got an internship at the NBC station in Peoria, which was WEEK at the time. I did an intern there as a news photographer, so a camera person. Oh. Now when somebody is at, like my daughter's in college, and she'll run camera for different things. She's fallen into the family business. But when, the cameras she holds are, 3 pounds. I had a camera that went, over my shoulder. I had a deck. I had a camera. and I had a belt. So like, if you can remember the commercials from when we were kids, like the Frito Bandito, and he would have like this thing that went across do you remember he would have like this, I don't know, belt that went across. It had like ammunition.
Right.
He wore it over his shoulder. Well, there was a camera battery belt that the guys would wear around their waist, but it would fall all the way to the floor for me. So I would have to wear that over my left shoulder, like a Miss America
sash, right?
A sash, right?
Right.
So I'd have that on my left shoulder. I'd have the tape deck from the strap on my right shoulder, the camera on my right shoulder, and that was. And again, I was like literally like 105 pounds, and oh my God!
And then you'd have to like be on scene to film something, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I would, sometimes dead bodies.
I can imagine.
Sometimes tricky things. Sometimes politicians yelling at us, things like that. And I remember with the specific dead body that the news director called me into his office and said, "You did such a good job." This was probably after I think I was working there full time at the time after graduation. He said, "You did such a good job. You were so respectful." And I'm thinking to myself, I was afraid to get too close. I'm glad I looked respectful.
But it's okay if he thinks that.
Yes. But yeah, I remember, shooting a Caterpillar was the big plant down there.
Oh yeah.
Did, like farm equipment and stuff. And they had big layoffs, and it was a Caterpillar town. And I remember there was a meeting where they were educating some of the people who'd been laid off about some opportunities that they might have and how to move forward. I just kind of shot like things like their hands, as they're wringing their hands and their, things they're fidgeting with and all this stuff, and cut those in with the wider shots of them. And the news director called me in again and said, this is beautiful. You caught their anxiety and their worry.
Wow.
And so I remember thinking, oh, it's the details. If you pay attention to the details, that's what really matters in a story. You want to get those moments. And I said, at the end of the day, it's about those moments. And so I learned that. I learned that then. And
that you couldn't be, like I was going to ask you, they didn't just throw a camera on your shoulder. You had to know how to use all that equipment. Was that part of what you learned in school?
Yeah.
And so you had those skills, and then, but to do what you were doing, you really had to have an eye for these things and understand what elements, either you were drawn to or what you thought people would want to see, right?
Yeah. And you, as the person who was out there shooting the story, the way it was done back then, this is different now. But in those days, I would shoot the story and then I would go back and edit the story. So I also had to learn to see the end result, because I was the one who was going to be giving me the footage. And if I didn't have the footage, I had no one to blame but myself. And so I would go and I would shoot those things and make sure I had the coverage, I had the wide shots, I had the close-ups, all of the things. And I had the sound bites I needed. And then I would go back into the edit room and sometimes work with the reporter. And she would say, "Hey, this is the soundbite I love from him," or this or that. And we would work together. And then she would go off to write the story, the intro. She'd give me a script. She'd record voiceover, bring that in, and then I put it all together. And so I learned to work from the final product backwards. And make sure that I always had everything. And so that was really, really valuable.
I bet.
Those jobs, and were so great. And then I became a stage manager at the station, and I worked during the live news shows, queuing the talent. And from there, I worked my way up to director, and I would direct the live news shows.
Wow. It's interesting. I mean, I'm curious. So you worked there after graduation. You took on a full-time job. So I assume you were living in Peoria and working, and then you went from being a photographer, doing everything from, taking the final product and working backwards. I love the way you said that. And then you became a stage manager and then a director. What was the sort of time frame over which you moved from one role to the next? And was it a natural progression that somebody would go from each of those roles to the following roles, or?
The internship ended, and I didn't necessarily want to stay carrying around 50 pounds of gear,
Yeah.
And so they had a stage manager opening, and I took that job after college. I guess that must have been the demarcation, or maybe a few months after college. Like I might have continued for a little while, but
so you were in your early 20s.
Yeah, I was just right out of school, and then I was a stage manager for a while. And I remember going out to lunch with a friend in Peoria who asked me, are you thinking about directing? And I was like, oh, I'm not ready yet. And then the next day I went into work, and my boss told me that the director had gotten a job in Minneapolis and she was leaving, and I was the new weekend director. And I was like, okay.
Oh, so how much time had gone on between becoming the manager and then becoming?
Gosh, I don't even think I was a stage manager for a year.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think it was less than that, because I was only there after college. I was there after college for 2.5 years. So
I see.
Yeah, I think maybe around a year. But I didn't, I was comfortable. I was like, I learned a lot. And plus, when you're the stage manager, it's also called floor director, and you're the person in charge of the studio. Mm-hmm. And so, I'm bossy, and that fit.
Yeah.
And,
you like to be in control. We know that.
I like to be in control. And so I was in charge.
Yeah.
And so I was used to that. And then when I went into the director's chair, I knew what I was doing. I mean, I knew how to do it, and I was field directing at the time. Field directing is like, you have the camera and can you shoot a commercial kind of thing. And so then I started directing the news, and I was there for probably a year and a half-ish. Mm-hmm. And one of the guys who had just started, so I'd been there I'd been at the station almost 2.5 years. Mm-hmm. And a guy had been there 6 months, and he was going to go on vacation. And I was like, how can you afford to go on vacation? Like, he was going to an island or something. I'm like, man, how can you afford to go on vacation for what they pay us? And he was like, yeah, I only make whatever. And I was like, so much more than I. And he could direct commercials, but he couldn't direct live news. And I could direct both. And I'd been there, 2 years longer than him. And because he was asking me if I could take care of his cat while he was on this vacation. And so he goes on the vacation, I take care of the cat. He was a lovely guy. It wasn't his fault, but it was ridiculous. And neither of us had families to support or anything like that. And I remember not feeling well and taking the day off, but it was more like a mental health day. Like, I called in sick because I was like, oh, of course he's getting paid more than me. And significantly more. Like, I was taking a $10 bill to the grocery store every, Friday and buying, pasta.
Yeah.
And that's what I was living on. And here he is going, to Aruba or whatever the heck. I was like, how can he do that? And he was making more than twice what I was making.
Wow.
And so I went to get Chinese food. I came home, which was a big splurge, came home, sat on the floor of my living room, opened the fortune cookie, and it said something to the effect of, it's time for a change, something like that. And I was like, okay. And I went in the next day and I quit. And my boss was like, well, what are you going to do? You don't have another job. And I said, and I give myself credit for this, I said, it's not like I'm going to notice the loss of income. I'm barely making anything here.
Yeah.
I was mad. And then I left, and I got a vacation relief. It was called vacation relief back in the day. And it was just 3 months working for a TV station. And I had an offer in Chicago, and I had an offer for the exact same job in Washington, D.C. And I thought, well, I'm from Chicago. I'll probably end up back in Chicago. Now's the time to go somewhere else. So I was single, and I was like, I'm going. So I went to DC, and then I was at the NBC station for 4.5 years.
And did you check to see what everyone else was making? I'm just kidding. But.
Well, I was in a union. I joined the Directors Guild of America, and you get statements that say, here's the minimum that they can pay you when you're in the first 6 months. After 6 months, they must pay you this as a minimum. And then there was like a 2.5-year tier or something. By the time you got to that 2.5-year tier, you're getting paid the highest scale you can get paid in the Directors Guild for that exact job.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, I was also directing. I was working with this wonderful man named Max Schindler Sr. And Max directed the Today Show from Washington, D.C. And then every Friday, every Thursday, he flew to LA he was one of the vice presidents of the Directors Guild of America. So he flew every weekend to do these meetings on Friday.
Wow.
And so that meant I had to sit in his chair on Fridays and direct the Today Show from Washington. Well, Willard Scott that's how long ago this was. Willard Scott was, if for anyone who remembers him, was the weather guy for the Today Show. He lived in Virginia.
Right, that's right.
He would be in New York for the week, and then on Fridays he would do the weather from Washington, D.C., which meant I was directing. And the Directors Guild had a rule that anyone who directs 5 minutes of network programming gets paid as a director for the week. And so Max would go every Friday, and every Friday I would direct those weather segments, probably about 20 minutes of weather. And if there was a politician who would come in and be interviewed, from the New York studio, but the guy would be in our studio. So I would be directing, and that live network directing then was pretty lucrative.
I bet.
And then after a while, I think 4.5 years, I'd kind of done the elections. I'd done inaugurations. I had done political conventions. I'd kind of done the whole thing. I'd worked on Meet the Press on weekends. I worked on the Today Show. So I'd kind of done everything I wanted to do. And I had an opportunity when the director of Meet the Press had left. I applied for the job, and everybody in the longest running show on television to this day. And when I applied, the bureau chief said, "Oh yes, we've given you consideration, but we've decided to go with this other guy who was from another, station and had never, I don't even know if they'd seen Meet the Press." And so I said, I would like to be considered for this job. And he's like, "Yeah, we have considered you, but we're going to go with this other guy from, Minneapolis or whatever." And I was like, have I ever, sometimes I think about what I said to people, but if we all go back to where I started, I think I said, well, have I ever directed anything in this building? And he said, "I don't know." And I said, "Have I ever directed anything in my career?" And he said, "I don't know." And I said, "Well, thanks for the consideration." And I kind of stormed out. Because once again, it was this sexism thing. And in the history of Meet the Press, that was the first time the associate director was not promoted to the director. And it was the first time the associate director was a woman. So at that point, I was pretty fed up. I'm out of here, because I kept coming across the same, sexism.
Wow.
And I just was tired of it. And then I went back to Chicago and freelanced. And that's when I had the opportunity to go to the Oprah Show. But the really cool thing, Tammy, is what goes around comes around, because the guy they hired to direct Meet the Press, the very first day that he got this job that I wanted, right? And all the crew hated him because they all loved me and they wanted me to get the job. And this poor guy comes in. And so I take him out to lunch, and the first thing I said to him is, "Everybody hates you. I'm not going to screw you over. I'm going to be nice, but I'm out of here. So you're going to need to replace me in the next 2 months. But I'll help the transition and all this stuff." And he said, "Thank you." And turned out to be one of the sweetest people I've ever known in my life. We're friends to this day.
Oh, how nice.
And and so he would be directing Meet the Press and would be missing things. And I lean over, turn my headset off, whisper in his ear, "Camera 2, get to the break position." And he'd say, "Camera 2 to the break position." I was directing. But, so I saved him because I didn't want him to sink. And then I knew I was on my way out. And then I left and started freelancing in Chicago. And then guess who got the job as the director of the Oprah Winfrey Show? That guy, Joey. And guess who he called? He called me. He said, Mary, I'm going to be directing the Oprah Show. Will you come in and be my associate director? And I said, yeah. And that's how I got into the Oprah Show. And then ultimately he left and I stayed there for many years. And then I left to have my baby. And then I came back and was in post-production.
And was that they called you back? Did they call you back to do post-production, or was that something that you wanted to do? Yeah.
I was in the Directors Guild of America and in the DGA, the director, associate director, stage manager, and host AD, associate director. Those people are all Directors Guild people. And the job of the host AD is to make sure that the director's vision is intact. Then I stayed for the last 8 years of the Oprah Show as a post producer.
Oh, till they went off the air.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. And so over that time, you were also raising a family at that time.
Yeah.
And so, I'm thinking about how you developed this love for TV in high school. Could you have ever imagined all these different roles you were in? And I'm just curious if there was some kind of a thread that ran through all of that kept you so engaged in being in that industry, let's say. I mean, clearly you were able to find your way into, major networks, and then the Today Show, Meet the Press, Oprah. I mean, these weren't little, tiny town, TV shows. These were very high profile. And so how did that evolve for you in terms of your sense of yourself professionally and what you were wanting for yourself at that point? And I assume that you knew within a reasonable time period that Oprah was going to wind down. Did you have other ideas about what you wanted to do next? So I'm just thinking about the whole trajectory for you and the love that you had started with TV.
Yeah. I mean, one of the reasons I love TV is because of the type of people who work in TV. They're kind of like theater people, warm and, fun and kind and accepting. And because it's not a normal profession in the sense that it is not 9 to 5.
Right.
So you can imagine the relationship you have with your coworkers when you talk to them at 1 PM. That's different when you're talking to your coworker at 1 AM because you're still there.
Right.
And we just really became very, very close. So we would get the shows once they were taped. And then we would work together. There were 3 teams of editors and 3 teams of post-producer, editor, assistant, editor. And my team, the last several years, was an all-woman team. So that was really fun.
Yeah.
I was just talking to my friend yesterday, who was the editor that I worked with then. We've been friends for years. But we would have to get a show on a lot of times the next day. And so you really bond with people.
Yeah.
You're not eating lunch. It's not like, oh, we've been here for 4 hours. It's time for lunch. Let's all go for an hour.
Yeah.
I used to joke, the food would always come to us, right? So the assistants would order food and then they'd pick it up and then they'd bring it or it get delivered. And once in a while I would joke, oh my God, we're going to the food. Like we wouldn't call it going to lunch. I mean, like,
going to the food.
So, I loved working in television because you form relationships in a different way.
Yeah.
When you're like on the front lines in television.
Yeah.
That show has to be done by 5 AM so that it can be fed. In the earlier days, I would physically take a 1-inch copy of the Oprah Show in my car, drive it to the place that it was fed from. And then that would be fed to the stations. But then we were able to feed it directly from Harpo later, but it would have to be done in a certain amount of time so that the person who then had that job had enough time, because it would air at 9 a.m.
Right.
And so that's not a lot of time. So sometimes I might go home at 5.
Wow. Wow.
So,
but you're pointing to something that I think is so true for a lot of people when it comes to their work and their careers, that if they enjoy the people they're working with and they feel like they're in the right culture or the right environment, there's so many things that they don't mind doing or that they are happy to work on, even if it's, not the thing they were trained to do, or maybe it's not in their job description, but they are generally pretty happy if they are in an environment with people they enjoy working with. Not to say that they don't want to feel challenged or that they're learning new things and all of that. They want all that too. But it does seem that is something that really means a lot to people.
Yeah, we were, the Harpo people, we have our own secret Facebook page. You can't find it because it's secret. And we still stay in touch. My department had a prom the last season.
Oh, fun.
We made a video when one of our beloved executive producer left and went to OWN, and we recorded a song for her and made a music video. Fun. I mean, we had editors.
Yeah.
And we all sang on it, which was hysterical. But we did things like that. And I think the fact that the job had room for creativity, for problem solving, and you had to be able to meet a deadline. You couldn't exceed a deadline because then the show wouldn't air. So when I said, if we had to get the show to the person who was going to feed it by 5 a.m., that wasn't 5:10. That was 5 a.m. because if you got it to him at 5:10, he might not be able to do his job.
Right.
And that was putting the show at risk of airing. The other thing too is I'm someone who likes control, but I also want to do things not perfect, but excellent.
Yeah.
And there was an expectation of excellence at Harpo. And we all had that of each other.
Yeah.
We knew it was in God knows how many countries. And we took a lot of pride.
Yeah. No, and it showed in so many ways.
Yeah. And Oprah was always really good to us. And I remember one time we taped 3 shows in a day, which I don't know if we ever did that. And Oprah had a sock hop for us. She's like, studio, bring your socks. And we just danced.
I love it.
And that wasn't planned. It was just let's just have some fun because we had a lot. So it was a lovely place to work. Oprah took us on trips with our families. I mean, it was hard work and it was long hours, but we would have I would have summers off and I would have a month off at Christmas, and being a mom, that was really important to me.
I bet. Clearly you were really happy there. Do you think you would have just stayed if Oprah stayed on the air, or do you think eventually you were thinking I'm ready for something else?
When they told me that they didn't have a job for me at OWN, my first reaction internally was, I'm free. It was a very happy reaction, not because I didn't love it, because I was tired. And I also wrote a parenting book that came out in October of 2011, which was season 25. And so I literally was writing a book and doing all that. I mean, I was exhausted, and I was a mom to 2 kids, and I was super, super tired. So I joke that for 8 months, I just slept. I mean, I still freelanced and things like that, but I was tired. And also the thing was, it wasn't the Oprah show anymore. It switched to OWN and had Rosie O'Donnell show and different shows like that.
Right.
I had no interest in any of that. I loved working at the Oprah show, but there was other TV work in Chicago.
So, and then what made you decide to write a book?
I wrote a book because when my son was 5, he got a present, and his birthday is in the winter, and this was the summer. And he got a present, and it was unexpected. It was from a friend who came over, and he opened it up, and he could read at 5. So he was like excited. Was it a book? Was it a toy? Was it a game?
Yeah.
It was a t-shirt. And so he dropped the t-shirt on the ground, still in the wrapping. He walked out of the room, little 5-year-old, the ribbon coiled around his ankle, and he was dragging the t-shirt in the ribbon in the packaging away. And I was like, oh my God, honey, what do you say? And he was like, thank you. And I was completely mortified. And so at that time, I did a month called Gratitude Month with him, and we learned all about gratitude and made posters and all this kind of stuff. Then fast forward to my daughter being 5 and my son being 10. And the same kind of issues came up. And we were still like trying to get our kids to, be honest. And so we decided that as busy parents, we were dropping the ball with values. And so I created this month by month guide. It was just, January was Gratitude Month, and we had 3 exercises that were fun to do. And then February was compassion, and etc. So I created the system, and we were living the system, and that was it.
Yeah.
And then something pretty difficult happened, which was a really good friend of mine who was a producer died very suddenly. We were within a month of each other in age.
Oh my goodness.
And his name was George Washington. And
oh my goodness.
George was just an extraordinary person. And he died very, very suddenly. I had talked to him the day before.
Oh.
And I felt like his life had just been cut short. And he had wanted to work for the Oprah Show for a long time. And he got an interview. And then the morning of the interview, he didn't show up. And I called the producer and said, how did the interview go with George? And she was like, he didn't come. And he would never speak of it. But I think he got scared and thought somehow he wasn't good enough to work at the Oprah Show.
Oh my
and then,
goodness.
Within a year or so, he had passed away quite suddenly. And I thought, well, he died without living his dream. He somehow thought he couldn't do this, which is total baloney. He would have been amazing. And so driving home from his funeral, I had driven separate from my husband because he'd come from work. And so I'm driving by myself. It's like a cold Chicago January night. And I was crying. And I said, you know what, George, the next time something comes along in my life, I know with absolute certainty I cannot do, I will do it for you. And those are the exact words I spoke. And my sister had mentioned to her agent, because she writes books, mysteries, and she'd mentioned to her agent that I do this thing with my family. And her agent is a mom of 2 boys, and her agent said, that's a book. So her agent called me and said, you have a book.
Wow.
And I was like, no, I don't have a book. And I also told her, I can't say I work for the Oprah Show. I can't try to get a book deal because I work for the Oprah Show and people think I'll get at the Oprah Show. That's not how it works. I can say I have worked for the Oprah Show, but I can't, and that was fair. And she said, no worries. I'm not putting that in the pitch or anything. And then she asked me to write a book proposal. I didn't know what I was doing. And we got some nibbles, and I didn't think anything was ever going to come of it.
Really?
And then we got, and so she sold it. And then I wrote it in about 6 months, and it went on to do really well. And it won a couple of awards, and won the Mom's Choice Gold Award and another one. And then after a media interview, about 4 months after publication, it went to #1 in parenting and number 97 overall on Amazon. I was Amazon's #1 mover and shaker that day, which means I was the fastest selling nonfiction book on Amazon. And that was because of a media interview that went that day. Media,
and that's where the seed was planted.
Yeah.
So to speak.
Yeah, it was really the sort of intersection of the fact that I worked in media for so long and had such an understanding, but completely took for granted all the stuff I knew. And then I was an author, and I started doing media. And I had a traditional publisher. So I had a publicist assigned to me for 3 months. It's called a launch publicist. And so, I had this really sort of 360-degree experience of media and being an author.
Did you think at that time, like, oh, maybe I'll do something with this down the road, or no?
I didn't. But a few years after the book, I started to have health issues, and I started to collapse, and I started to have trouble talking.
Oh my goodness.
And I started to have pretty serious memory issues.
Oh.
And I was getting various opinions from neurologists and doctors and, scary things.
Yeah.
One doctor who's like a wellness doctor who I'd gone to, he said, I think it's mold. I think you have a mold illness. And he did the tests, and that's what he diagnosed me with. And he said, this is how you treat it, but it was a harsh kind of treatment. And so during that time, I was struggling with being able to do freelance television work because I was walking with a cane. And, my work is in the control room is pretty high pressure.
Yeah.
And my brain needed to be there, and I needed to be able to speak.
Yeah.
I would, hold something up. I'd hold like a glass up, and I'd say to my daughter, just remind me, this is a fork, right? And she'd be like, Mom, that's a glass. And I'd look at it and I'd go, that's so interesting. Because I'm thinking that's a fork. I remember asking her once, that's a lamp, right? And she said, Mom, that's an umbrella. But that's how my brain was working. It was just, these mycotoxins in the mold are pretty frightening. And so
that's amazing that they figured that out, though.
It was that doctor was one of, at the time, 12 doctors certified in this particular mold protocol from the doctor who'd gone down to Hurricane Katrina and treated the people there. It's called the Shoemaker protocol. And so I just happened to go to this wellness doctor. He was already the doctor that I went to. And he said, don't worry about all this other stuff. Let's treat it for this. I'm confident you're going to get better. And, I was walking with a cane, and I was struggling a lot. It was a really dark time. And so, I just kind of kept going. And during that time, my friend Elizabeth said, hey, I'm at this, she's a doctor, a psychologist. And she said, I'm at this conference, and there's somebody I think would benefit from media coaching. Can I pass along a name? And I said, well, I'm not a media coach. And she said, you media coach me all the time. So, because she does television and stuff. And so she said, just talk to this person. And so I did. And then I started taking on clients. And sometimes I would stumble over my words, but it just kind of went with it. And I never told them. And I had a couple of clients at the time who were medical doctors with books. And so I just made it work. And I started to be able to make a little bit of a living through that. And, my husband was still working. And then eventually I recovered from that. And I still had some things residual. I'm still clumsy. I'm very clumsy. I break glasses and things like that all the time, but it's a small price to pay.
But it's interesting how your friend said, of course you're a media coach. You coach me all the time. And then, so it wasn't like you had some vision for yourself for that type of work. It really came about rather organically in that way.
Exactly. And my friend who had originally sent me clients said, what about teaching an online class? And I was so physically frail at the time. And she said, I'll do it with you. And her name is Dr. Elizabeth Lombardo, and she's amazing. And I always talked to her recently. And I said, all these clients with their books on my wall, that's because of you, because you really urged me to do
planted that seed. Yeah.
She really did. And so we did a course together in 2017. We had moved to Nashville. I was working for Pickler and Ben with a bunch of Harpo people. We called it Harpo South. And it was just this coming home feeling, moving to a new place, but being at home and with my Harpo family. And that was a couple of years. So it was great. And by then, she had gotten busy and I started just teaching stuff on my own. But she kind of pushed me gently in that direction, which is what a good friend will do. That's just who she is. She's very kind. And so then I found myself as a media coach, and I didn't really have a plan, but I kind of taught on instinct. And then from there, I developed the media impact method, which is identity, messaging, pitching, amplification, communication, and transformation. And for most authors, it's about pitching. But pitching the media when you're first of all, when you don't know how to pitch. But second of all, if you're going to create a media interview, that's probably going to live forever or close to forever on the internet. It's completely out of your control how long it lives. And if you're not proud of it, it's too bad. You've created marketing liability for your book and business and your brand, and you have no control over that. And so I wanted to prepare authors to do interviews that were intentional and strategic.
And your focus really has been women nonfiction authors. I mean, I know you've had other clients as well. But you really in the last several years have really focused quite a bit on women nonfiction authors. And you have your course, Profitable Publicity, and then your Media Success Blueprint program, which is even more intensive. Tell us a little bit about those.
Oh, sure. Profitable Publicity kind of came about because it's a quick, high impact course, self-directed. And that came about because, I had authors tell me, podcasts don't sell books. I go on podcasts and I never sell books. And I'm like, podcasts are awesome for selling books. First of all, it shouldn't be your focus. I'm going to sell. You should go to serve. But so I thought, well, I'm going to create a course that shows them how to be strategic and intentional when they do media interviews. And, at that point I was working specifically with women, in part because I felt drawn to do that, but also because you can target your audience, but at the end of the day, your audience chooses you. And it was over and over women nonfiction authors that were taking my classes. And I was like, okay, well, this is my audience, clearly. And these are the people I really enjoy working with. I want to amplify their voices and their wisdom in media. It's a really budget-friendly, schedule-friendly course. It's very high impact, but it's specifically for that. It has nothing to do with pitching or anything like that. And then Media Success Blueprint is a much more comprehensive course. It's 24 videos/audios. And in Media Success Blueprint, it's everything from look at your identity. So who are you? Whom do you serve? What's your mindset for media? And then you start to look at messaging. And are you consistent in your messaging on social media and your website? Because media is going to pay attention to that. And if I'm a producer and I check you out on LinkedIn and you say one thing there, and then I go to your website, but your website isn't the same, it's like a different message, or I'm gone. Because people say a confused mind never buys. Well, a confused producer never books. Then we get to pitching. Once you got your ducks in a row, then we can talk about pitching, who to pitch, how to pitch, when to pitch strategically. And then from there, it's amplification, which is strategy. What are producers looking for? What are columnists looking for? Let's be strategic and give them what they want. And then communication, which I say is the least sexy of all of the modules. it's what to say. It's what to actually say when you have that media moment. And then in transformation, it's what transformation will you bring about in that audience? You're going to be on this local news show for 5 minutes. You're going to be talking about how to have a safe summer with your kids or whatever it is. And you've got tips to share, and you're coming in, you want to know, I'm here to help. I'm here to serve. And then certainly in the intro, we're going to talk about that you're an author when show your book. And at the end, we're going to call to action. And so that's super important. And I also really hope that the authors experience a transformation going through this program. And I certainly see that in the coaching. I could have a coaching program called Publish to Prime Time.
Right.
And that's a small group coaching program for women nonfiction authors, and it runs for 5 months. And I get to see the transformation that occurs in the authors as well. It goes through those different stages,
Right.
So I have found this to be incredibly successful. It's all from a media point of view, from the inside media insider point of view, as well as an author who's taken that journey myself.
Right. Well, I think that's the thing is you've experienced it from sort of both sides, so to speak. And I've been a client and student of yours, so I can speak for that as well as being incredibly comprehensive. You're, the way that you guide people through all these various pieces. And it's also just gets you to a point where you're so self-aware of what you're doing and why you're doing it, and then how to really, in a crisp but clear way, present it out there. So we're going to have your your social media links and your website and all the information about your programs and courses in the show notes. I am so excited for people to learn more about what you offer and what you've done. Really appreciate you being here today, Mary.
Thank you, Tammy.
And thank you so much for telling your story. It's so compelling. And I just want to thank you for being here on Work from the Inside Out. It's delightful. I love spending time with you.
Thank you so much. Me too.
I hope you enjoyed my interview with Mary O'Donoghue. It was so interesting to speak with her and learn about her early life, her transitions, and her current work. What is your key takeaway from our interview? If you're interested in any of the resources mentioned in today's podcast, you can find them in the show notes on my website at tammygoularloeb.com/podcast. Just look for episode 234. Are you anticipating your next professional move? Check out my award-winning book, Work from the Inside Out, Break Through 9 Common Obstacles and Design a Career That Fulfills You. It's available through my website, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, independent bookstores, or through your local library. If you were inspired by this episode with Mary, please share it with your friends and colleagues, and please do subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. Remember, subscribing is always free. If you're enjoying the podcast, it would mean so much to me if you would write a brief and honest review on Apple Podcasts. It's easy to find. Just go to my website, tammygoularloeb.com/podcast. Click on the Apple Podcast button and follow the instructions provided there. You can also help sustain this podcast by buying me a cup of coffee. Go to buymeacoffee.com/TammyGL. Since this podcast is self-funded, your support is much appreciated. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, it's never too late or too impossible to increase your sense of fulfillment and satisfaction in your work and other meaningful activities. Let me know how it's going for you. I'd love to hear from you. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to the Work from the Inside Out podcast. For more information, you can find us at www.workfromtheinsideout.com.